Um, Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This is a new adventure for all of us, the Lonely Learner series. Just as an overview, it's a chance for all of us to connect and find community in these crazy times, but also have some lifelong learning here, have some education, and we're really looking forward to being able to share and commune with all of you guys today. We do have a really great lineup of people who are going to be speaking with us over the coming weeks. I'm really pleased to welcome Sri to be our first, and I'll talk about him in just a second. But if you haven't already looked at the lineup, please feel free to take a look at our landing page on our website, and I'll send you guys that link at the end of this as well. Our next speaker next week we're really excited about Tim Madigan, so more to come on that towards the end of this session. A few housekeeping things just to keep track of. In terms of the format of today's session, Sri and I are going to talk a little bit. We're going to just have a brief discussion about some of his thoughts and posits about what's happening in the industry and where it's going. Then we're going to turn it over to Sri to do a little bit of a master class. So he's going to teach on a few different topics in that session, and we're excited to learn from him. Then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So you're going to see both a chat panel and a question panel in this application Livestorm that we use for this event. And the chat panel is great if you're just having dialogue and chatting with people. But if you have a question for us to address towards the end of the webinar or the session, just post it in the question section, and then everybody will be able to see those questions as we start to answer them. So that's just kind of a little overview of how the day is going to go. At this point, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Amanda Wolf. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at a company called OneSpace. OneSpace is a digital shelf optimization company. So essentially our software and services improve your content on the different online retailers for increased visibility and conversion. We'll talk a little bit more about some of that in the masterclass portion in terms of the need to do those kinds of things, but we're here to help. And then today I'm pleased to be joined with Sri Rajagopalan. He's one of our industry's most prolific thought leaders. I think he's probably one of the few people out there that can command a single name like Cher or Prince. Just about everybody knows who Sri is. I think he knows all of you as well. But he's been a leader in e-commerce for a lot of heavy hitters like Frito-Lay, Johnson & Johnson, and Revlon. So we're really excited to learn from him today and to talk more about his thoughts about where we're going. So Sri, welcome.
Thank you, Amanda, and welcome everybody to my humble makeshift office from my actual master bedroom of the apartment in New York. It's the one time I'm actually jealous of anybody who may not be living in a city and maybe living in a suburbia where you actually get to have a wonderful home office in your basement. And just for the record, I actually lived in a suburb for most of my life here in the US. I've only lived in Manhattan 2 years, but who thought it would come to this? So wherever you are, whether you're here live or whether you listen to this at a later time, I hope you're safe and we all get through this together. And most importantly, you are listening to your local municipality's advice and following their instructions, whatever it may be. Stay at home, wear a mask, as the case may be. Stay safe.
Stay safe. That's exactly right. That's got to be number one priority for all of us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what this situation is doing for all of us in the e-commerce industry. And my first question is this: has the tipping point for e-commerce really arrived, or is this all just a ruse?
So I think that's a straightforward answer. For the longest time, having worked in fairly large multinationals, working with mega, multiple, multi-billion-dollar brands and with retail out there in the United States, I would always get this question. And the question would be, the business is not large enough, e-commerce, why should I pay attention, things of that nature. So in my humble opinion, absolutely, 1000%, again, opinion of one, Sri's opinion, the tipping point for e-commerce has arrived. It's unfortunate it took an event like this for the tipping point to arrive. What do I mean by the tipping point has arrived? Does it mean all of a sudden retail sales in the United States for digital will shoot from the average of 16% it is in fast-moving consumer goods today to 50 or 60 or even 80, and there'll be a massive retail apocalypse where every store door shuts? Although these days, living in Manhattan, it does feel there's an apocalypse in general, like Will Smith from I Am Legend. walking around the streets. But no, that's not what the tipping point for e-commerce having arrived here means. What it means is if you're in the 16% range here, it was accelerating about 8 to 10% as an average through e-marketed data that we observed. And it would have hit the 25% range about 5 to 7 years from now with that 10%, somewhere between the 8-10% acceleration growth. I think the massive difference now is a huge population or a huge subsegment of the population has now been introduced to digital purchasing for the first time, either via desktop, their phone, an iPad, a tablet, whatever the case might be. And they're suddenly realizing, like many of us right now, that sitting on the bed with our pajamas and actually making a couple clicks and something showing at your doorstep with no contact, nothing in a couple of days, 3 days as the case may be, same day as the case may be, is a fascinating experience. And I think a certain subsegment of that is never going back in store for certain purchases. So I think, yes, the tipping point has arrived, but that doesn't mean it's going to be like an 80% shift. It means that 25% benchmark, which is a quarter of all retail sales in the United States, is going to come by much faster. And I think it's going to come by in less than 2 years. So if you're in the digital field and you're in the e-commerce field, folks, this is your time. Claim it and own it like a champion, because the industry and your consumers need you to.
So assuming that this is good for the industry, why did it take so long?
That's actually a pet peeve question. Again, if you look at how, if you look at how the business model of mid-tier and larger tier manufacturers, aka brands, CPG, is built, a large part of it is built on scale. Now, if you go back in history, 50, 60 years, and iconic companies like Coca-Cola, etc., didn't have the scale they have today. But today they have reached a certain scale and they've fine-tuned their operating principles to be nothing less than truckload delivery at a time. Their route is optimized. How much they can supply at one time is optimized. Innovation is optimized. And actually, in many cases, innovation depends on reaching a certain number of store doors, aka scale at one point. So that's what was holding CPG companies back from really going explosive with their digital selling. I draw a line between digital and digital selling because a large part of being digital is actually marketing, 80% marketing, 20% selling. But with the tipping point now having arrived and the shift to that magic 25% coming much faster, we're going to see a lot more, I would say, sales dollars or commercial dollars in the mix for growth available to those who actually seize it. So in my humble opinion, the reason it took so long was how the P&L models have been built over the course of the last 3 or 4 decades in the industry. But a sudden, I would say almost unintended learning over the course of the last 4 weeks. And unfortunately, from all the news that's coming in another 8 to 12 weeks, it is going to leave us with no choice but to learn the art of optimizing for digital sales. And at the end of the day, it'll become another optimization challenge. But yes, I don't think we have a choice. We need to do this.
So who's going to benefit most from this? Retailers, brands, like?
If you talk about it, the point of sale is what matters at the end of the day. If you started looking at where the dollars are going to go at the end of the day. So the ones that are going to benefit from this the most are obviously retailers, because they will have a new way to attract traffic as well. Now, of course, that means massive learning, new skills, things of that nature. But it'll be the retailers. But I want to append to that statement, retailers, and kind of also put in startups in there. Most startups in the United States these days, and I'm keeping my conversation here to the United States, most of them start digitally. Either digital natives or the D2C companies. At bottom line, there's a lot of confusion in CPG today between D2C, omnichannel, things of that nature. But when you're in the business of D2C, you're essentially an end-to-end retailer, owning all parts of supply chain, innovation, distribution, value to the consumer, promotions, the whole gamut of CPG. And startups will benefit in the process significantly as well. And then obviously CPG manufacturers follow the tail because they are directly attached to the point of sale to a given retailer. But there's no doubt in my mind, this is the retailer's playground to leverage and really be a part of. And I don't think retailers have a choice. And the simple reason is the consumer needs them to, because our joint responsibility of the industry and the consumer is to deliver value at a quality for the consumer.
Yeah, yeah. So which retailers do you think have stepped up the most during these times? Like, who do you think is really leading the charge?
What a great question. If you go locally into towns and rural areas in America and different regions in America, you're going to find a plethora of retailers have actually stepped up to this challenge and they're doing amazing things for their employees. This is when many of them are trying not to furlough, they're trying to keep healthcare benefits. So in general, I think we owe an applause to the retail community trying their best. They're keeping the stores open so people can get their consumer staples and essentials all week long as required. So I'm going to generally applaud all retailers in general. But if I had to pick one, absolutely, I think the one that has seized the moment, is very active, is talking to consumers, is working with their suppliers and with their vendors on a daily basis, trying to keep up the best they can with stock in store, online, ensuring that their online grocery pickup works, their buy online pickup in store works, is Walmart. I think Walmart has done an amazing job in the last 4 weeks of actually being out there showing up. I got to also applaud the drug channel, CVS being profound with what it's doing. Who would have ever thought that there'll be curbside pickup of pharmacy deliveries for practically any of your pharmacy orders right at the door of the retailer? And
Yeah, I just saw today.
Yeah.
I just saw today that Walgreens is stepping up their partnership with Postmates for more pharmacy deliveries that are contactless as well.
Absolutely. So of course, I'm going to say Amazon. Of course, this is Amazon's forte, so I don't need to call out Amazon specifically. But the fact that they can still get products to you and they're working hard to staff their warehouses and things, the operations aren't falling apart, is a testimony to the capabilities they've already built. Again, the one that really stands out in my mind without a doubt is Walmart.
So, last question, really. Are there any downsides for businesses that are shifting online? Do you see this as any kind of negative in any way?
I'm glad you asked me that question because I've been asked that question a million times. Or I've actually been told a million times through my journey here last decade in digital. Oh my gosh, if this happens, jobs are going to go away, AI is going to do blah, 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 voice is going to do blah, 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 et cetera, robotics is going to kill half the workforce, et cetera, all urban legends. I think what we need to reflect on is in the United States, we are generally not, whenever there's a technology-induced change that comes by, we actually don't do a good job of upskilling the workforce that's not already talented in that technology. But if you thought about it now, all of us are home. Most of us are home majority of the day. The commutes in our lives have evaporated. They're about 10 feet, 20 feet, or maybe if you're lucky enough to have a basement office, it's 50 feet from where you get up and operate in your living rooms, etc. This is the opportunity to actually learn and upskill in a spectacular way. So at the surface level, the downside is the training on the job will need to change dramatically. Skill sets will change dramatically. But I would challenge everybody, what a great opportunity now in the next 12 weeks. The fact that there's 25 of you are already in this webinar, ready to have a dialogue, ask some questions, whatever the case might be, means you're ready for the challenge. You want to ask questions, you want to be part of the change. Congratulations to all of you for wanting to be part of the change. That's the only thing that I feel is a little bit of a watch out. It's not to do with people, but it has to do more with industry. And I feel we need to do a better job as an industry, better job even as a government, to make sure that when we adopt technology so that things can get optimized and better, we conscientiously put in an effort to upskill employees. Upskill the workforce is the right word that comes to mind.
Got it. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and turn it over to you. And I know you've got some slides and you're going to talk through some masterclass type topics. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you now. And you guys should see, there we go. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So here's what we're going to try and do. I've got a lot, and if you know me well enough by now, you know I have a lot to say. And I'm going to try and condense this to about 20 odd minutes so we have time for Q&A via chat at the end. So, and I've also tried to keep the material so that really the majority of you in this webinar are what I would call e-commerce rebels in the journey with me. Yes, I call you all e-commerce rebels. in the journey with me here, but really the material is geared for you to be able to read from, take to senior leadership, to make your business case, to complete this journey and do the right thing again for the industry. Because again, our responsibility jointly to the industry is to deliver value to the consumer and quality products. And that'll only happen when both CPG and retail understand that the tipping point has come and they deliver. So let's start number one with talent. If we don't have upskilling for talent and we don't have the right talent in digital, I would say everything else is gravy. Everything else would be a nice try. And what do I mean by the right talent? I've now touched several large multi-billion-dollar brands in different categories, whether it be beauty, whether it be baby, whether it be fragrances, whether it be over-the-counter medication, whether it be food and beverages through my days in PepsiCo and Frito-Lay. And one of the things the industry is still in love with at senior leadership is this word that says we must hire from the outside. We must hire digital natives. And my personal experience, my personal preference in the journey would be, in CPG, it's not the same as working on electronics or apparel. CPG tends to be a lower ASP business, average selling price business, and some of the skill sets required in that journey are simply not digital. They are knowing your business model inside out, knowing the price points of your products inside out, knowing the differentiation in your SKU and why a consumer journey shapes a certain way for a given subcategory in the products that you own. And for that, it's very important to know your brands. And another big plus point I would say that people need to think about when it comes to hiring talent is the knowledge of a customer. And when I say customer, I don't just mean a retail customer, but also the consumer, just basically consumer insights. For that, my vote would always go when hiring people in e-commerce, try to find the ones within your own organization that have a mindset for digital and put them in the roles and let them thrive along with you because they know your business model the absolute best. Now, that's not a blatant comment by me to say don't hire from the outside, but always make it a mix. Be open to bringing people within your own organization who know your brands and your business model inside out with awesome relationships with customers. The next one is another favorite of mine, and I say listen to your e-commerce rebels inside each of your organizations, because most CPGs have understood that the word e-commerce means something and they've had to react. They have small e-commerce teams. And what I'm going to advise leadership in this country is listen to those rebels that you've already put in place, because they've already done a lot of strategy work today. Just dust off the existing strategies they have. There's no need to repeat this journey every single year again and again and again. More importantly, though, even for all of us on the call today, be open to the notion of giving mentorship to these e-commerce rebels, because they have a very tough job. They have a very tough job of working cross-functionally and uniting functions that traditionally don't have much to do in conversations or be in meetings with each other. But also be open to the opportunity of reverse mentorship. So listen, get reverse mentored by these e-commerce rebels. And you don't have to do it all. If there are 10 strategies that they recommend, pick one or two that feel works with your business model the best, that an over-optimized business model, which is how most of CPG in the United States is today, the one that fits closest with it. But get going and listen to your e-commerce rebels. The third one when it comes to talent is it's very important to have one fearless leader. And this is usually your director of e-commerce, your VP of e-commerce, your SVP of e-commerce, as the case might be. This fearless leader is probably better hired from the outside. Yes, I actually said that. But it could be from the inside as well if they have a digital mindset and digital savviness. But the important thing I want to stress here is this role naturally needs to be senior enough in the organization, because it's a cross-functional role of influence. So if you're going to hire someone to be a fearless leader for e-commerce and you're not going to give them the remit as well as the empowerment, this is not going to go very far. So I'm going to encourage leaders in this country, give them the remit, give them the empowerment, and make sure it's a senior enough role in the organization that's backed by leadership. The last one is my own personal one, which I've already discussed a little bit before. I always vote for in-store experience as well as basic IT knowledge. It's very important to know the store environment because America, even I mentioned the tipping point earlier in this webinar, we'll get to 25% in the next 2 years or so as a humble prediction. That still leaves 75% of the business model in the in-store model. And this role will have to hear a lot of no's and a lot of questioning. And if you come from an in-store model and you have the experience, you're going to be able to understand why a no comes, and you're going to be able to craft your strategy in response to why a no came as opposed to disappointment that a no came. And the last one is upskilling talent. I kind of mentioned it already that the United States actually suffers from a disease of not focusing on upskilling talent when new technologies come in. But what I'd say is this can be solved so easily. There are hundreds of providers in the digital space. Actually, Amanda and OneSpace is one of them in the content SEO space, as well as content dissemination space. I'm sure, Amanda, if people asked you for some basic training, which you probably already have canned and ready to go, folks like you would be willing to share. So use your providers and ask them to help you with the training as required. And then when training actually comes by your way, start with the commercial logs first. We're going to talk about marketing next, but before I go there, I personally would feel if the commercial organization is not trained fully with digital selling, then you don't stand a shot. Everything else comes after that, and you follow up with supply chain, finance, and things of that nature. Amanda, if we asked you for training, you game?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Twist my arm. We're happy to help you.
Please. I won't be able to twist your arm virtually, so we'll go with this.
We'll do that.
All right. The second thing that comes to mind is learning the anchors of e-commerce. This is just a refresher for all of you. When I worked for Johnson & Johnson, my friend Anu there, I don't know if you're on the webinar today, Anu, but she and Chester Twigg, our global chief customer officer there, who came from P&G, coined a term, and the term was scanner, SCANR. And I've kind of taken that into my DNA as the anchors of e-commerce, or the levers where to focus on. The first one, S, stands for search, fairly straightforward. Leaders have to be able to understand the difference between SEO and SEM. I know it's disappointing to hear a senior leader say this in 2020, and this is a word that has been around for God knows how long, since Google became popular in the late 90s. But unless your leaders understand, if your CFO cannot rattle the difference between a SEO and SEM, it'll be hard to be able to invest in content that's SEO ready. And that's why I say that. The second piece is being able to articulate your Amazon SEM strategy very clearly, because pretty much every one of you on the call today have a Amazon business that you're supporting, or an omni-channel business. And most omni-channel retailers are now ready to open their own media agencies for a variety of reasons. Most will feel they're doing it to monetize it and it's easy money. That's not the reason. It's just human attention. Human attention has shifted from other formats onto retail platforms that they're buying on. And hence, they're creating media agencies to be able to respond to that and cater to the consumer. Because again, for the third time, I'll say it's a joint responsibility to the consumer. And your leaders have to be able to articulate that actual SEM strategy. I would throw Google in the mix as well. And then I'll follow it up by moving to the second word in scanner, SC, which is content. And I think OneSpace is the boss here of content, so I won't embarrass myself and throw 30 things at you folks over here. But the question that leaders have to ask when it comes to content is a very simple one. Why should anyone click on your SKU versus another SKU? Because in any retail environment, when consumers are searching for products, hundreds of SKUs shows up. And then with techniques such as conquesting, your competitor SKUs might show up. So you have to have a compelling reason why they would click on your SKU. The second thing is, how deep is your PDP or your product detail page? Sorry, I used a geeky technical term here, PDP, but yes, how deep does your PDP go? Do you have the right images, the right videos, things of that nature? And then the third one, I think, started getting a lot closer to me in my previous role in the beauty industry, which is, are you homogeneous across your content, across retail platforms? If you're an omni-channel, D2C, Amazon, pure play, are you using the same content again and again and again? Because if you are, you're just competing with yourself at the end of the day. You have to cater your content to be specific to retail platforms when a retailer is ready for that. The third one is assortment. or A, SCA as part of the scanner formula. I think the time has now come to have a discussion about what is the online unique assortment. Does your in-store shelf assortment stay the same as your online assortment? Does that even make sense anymore? Does it have to be an absolute carbon copy? Can they look and feel different? Things of that nature. And not having a multi-pack strategy for e-commerce in 2020 is just wrong in a multitude of ways, especially if you're dealing with less than $10 products. Pay attention to inners as well as how many inners go in a case pack. If you're one of the e-commerce rebels like me, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you're probably going through some challenges with it. But this is a very important one to discuss and roll up your sleeves and get to be experts on, is a multi-pack strategy. Then I'll go to the fourth one in scanner, which is N, or navigation. This is more for those in the D2C journey, and that what I refer to as navigation is the quality of your website, how easy it is to buy a product, how easy it is to go to the search tab, search for something, and how many clicks it takes to be in the cart and out and having a product receiving an email confirmation that says you've actually purchased the product and here's the tracking number. But I don't want to undermine the importance of navigation UX when it comes to even customers. Let's take Macy's. I'm throwing OSHA bone here. That's the Easter egg in this webinar. When it comes to Macy's as an example, there's a layout that Macy's has on how consumers can actually navigate through their website and find products in addition to the search bar, especially when it comes to fashion and luxury, including fragrances and even high-end skincare, etc. Consumers tend to actually use the navigation bar more than search. There are about 10 parameters that they can narrow down their products to that search actually will be very difficult to index or will take forever to index. In those sort of scenarios, as a manufacturer or vendor, you need to actually own participation with your retailer. I know there'll be a lot of excuses that say we're not category captains. It doesn't matter. You walk into the retailer with something that can benefit how consumers can find their product, especially with SEO. Odds are they'll at least listen to you. Whether they implement it or not is a different story. But if they don't listen, you're not going to get implementation. So we start first with pay attention to that. And the third one is education, because education is how consumer trust is built. So I don't feel CPG brands do a great job today on the education journey at all with consumers when it comes to websites, retail websites, content. Most of it is marketing and selling content, but those that take blogs seriously on their website and actually provide education that goes far more deeper than just the contents and ingredients of their products, those are winners in my eyes. So take that seriously. And the last one is R in scanner, SCANR again, or ratings and reviews. I think ratings and reviews, enough of you search for products every single day online and you're basing your decisions based on ratings and reviews. So three simple things comes in mind. I won't elaborate this one because all of you are in and out of ratings and reviews every day. The first one is important, which is how much is too much, how much is enough much, and how much is much. And it's going to depend based on the product and the subcategory. When it comes to electronics, consumers are actually browsing and looking for hundreds and thousands of reviews. They want to be able to sort reviews. They want to be able to find answers before they make choices on product. But if you're selling a fragrance as an example, or a skincare product, or if you're selling food and beverages, odds are these, once a product is purchased or people that are coming over from in-store, they're buying a product that they're already familiar with and they're loyal to, and you don't need hundreds and thousands of reviews. So I would focus more on authenticity and making sure every single one of those questions that are asked and put in reviews are answered versus just pure numbers. And most importantly, in ratings and reviews, I would say a skill set that matters a lot is, are you ready to act like a challenger brand, like a D2C startup brand, which means you take answering questions and that consumers put out via reviews very seriously and you respond back. And earlier I linked that back to upskilling. This is a skill set most CPG companies need to understand and take seriously. Some are doing it. Occasionally you do find reviews where the customer service of companies are actually responding with answers directly on a review online, but this needs to be a massive outreach that CPG needs to do. So that's the scanner philosophy. It's just an easy one to learn, and I have to thank Anu and Chester again for having put that in my head back at Johnson & Johnson. So why don't we go to the third one, which I think is a profound one. In my eyes, I feel e-commerce or digital selling is 80% marketing and 20% sales. Please don't shoot the messenger. This is through 10 years of experience, again, working in multiple categories. And so what I've found in my journeys across multiple subcategories is e-commerce usually sits in a sales function. Of course, marketing and sales are both commercial, but usually in a sales function because most business models are counting numbers. And when you go down that path and you don't pay attention to the actual marketing journey, there's a lot of misses. So let's discuss that. Number one that comes to my mind, the role of marketing. And this message is really for marketers more than it is for commercial selling people. Folks, you need to wake up, smell the coffee, and own e-commerce like a champion, because you heard it here. I'm going to repeat it again. E-commerce is 80% marketing, 20% selling. And today I find it's flipped the other way. I find that commercial sales folks are walking over to marketing, and actually there's conversations that are taking place in brands saying, why do we need to move marketing money from X to B? Or I like this marketing campaign versus having to do it on a retailer because I don't like the UX. I mean, this is all just silly. Marketing people, you need to be the bosses of search and content leadership. And the best content is the best representation, equity building for your brand. You need to own this like a champion. At the end of the day, SEO is directly proportional to the content you put out. You know your brand's the absolute best as marketing people. Own search and content leadership, please, as a champion. The second piece that marketing needs to own here is the wonderful world called innovation. Marketing is usually responsible in small tier, mid tier, large tier CPG to work with R&D based on consumer insights and data on what is the innovation pipeline for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, next 6 months, as the case might be. And then they work with selling functions to actually roll it out. E-commerce should absolutely not be any different. The most successful CPGs are the ones that will pull in e-commerce innovation into the marketing pipeline and actually do what they're very good at for the in-store model, which is use PLM, go through the stage gates, and this is how we'll get multi-packs done, folks. So innovation is the second part. Marketing, you need to own innovation for e-commerce, and digital selling is a champion, and packaging is a large part of that. If you thought about it for one quick second, when you receive your home delivery or you go to a store and pick up your product, as the case might be, your packaging is usually a brown cardboard box. If it's home delivery, you just rip the box, you cut it open, whatever the case might be, and you haven't paid much attention to the packaging. So marketing needs to evolve to understand that packaging is the digital PDP, and that's where the attention needs to go. Hence, number one, search and content leadership. The third one is a thorough knowledge of retail platforms. We should absolutely no longer be operating in a business model where understanding a retail platform is the responsibility of commercial sales only. It makes no sense at all, because Amazon now has Amazon Media and sponsored ads, which is search, which goes right back into search and content leadership. B2C is nothing like Amazon. It's an end-to-end retail ecosystem. And then you have pure plays like Box competing in the club channel, which are very different from D2C. And then you got the whole omni-channel ecosystem where things are sold in store, which marketers tend to know more because we have history in this country of having the store business model for 100 years. But it's very important for a marketer to know retail platforms inside out so that we can link it back to number one, which is search and content leadership. So how do you actually do that? The next one is by wanting to gain a knowledge of customers through owning customer relationships. Gone are the days in my mind where customer relationships and merchandising relationships should only be owned by sales. And in the industry, I still see this little thin wall between marketing and sales where there's ownership of stakeholders and words of that nature. All this needs to vanish. Guys, we're at a crisis moment. We're going to hit the tipping point in the next few months and in a year's time. 25% of retail is a lot. That wall needs to completely vanish. And salespeople, y'all need to take your marketing partners to your retail customers. Y'all need to roll up your sleeves with marketing and be part of that D2C ecosystem, even if D2C sits with marketing, and make sure you can influence what's sold in that channel. At the end of the day, a customer will ask you someday why you're selling something. Then the next one that comes to mind to me, and so just holding on to four one more time, I want to stress the importance. I'm going to say marketing, the ball's in your court. You need to ask your sales folks, your commercial sales folks, to ensure that they're taking you to the customer so you can be part of a merchandising discussion. That's how this will happen. The next one, the next one's pretty straightforward. It's Amazon, AMG, WMG, Google, things of that nature. We've already discussed it in number one. But marketing, you own this. Your sales folks shouldn't have to come to you and actually, quote unquote, yes, beg for dollars, dial for dollars. I've heard all these terms. Remember when we started this journey 10 years ago? That's how these business models were. You all need to make this part of your marketing mix, like AMG, WMG, Google investments, and sales. You need to know what Google search is actually doing for you, and you need to ask questions on what is CAC. Yes, CAC, cost of acquisition, coming out of money invested in Google search. At the end of the day, you're responsible for driving the dollars, salespeople. And the last one in this area that I'll say role of marketing is D2C. I want to end the debate who owns D2C. It's a journey that drives equity via a brand website. Your brand website is run by a brand. D2C should, in my mind, should absolutely be owned and run by a brand. There's no debate in my head. And that keeps the equity of the brand synchronous across the board, whether the product is sold in store, online, a combination of those, D2C only, things of that nature. There's no better way. I see a future very near. I would always say 2020 NACDS, and those of you that have been to NACDS know what I'm talking about, where customers are going to actually tell brands, before I take your innovation, bring me data. Did you test this out? And what better vehicle than D2C to actually run the industry famous term, test and learn, and maybe to a limited group of consumers that you've already collected data to see which line extension actually works. So I'll end this section by saying marketing, you own this. You own e-commerce as much as sales. Show up, claim your turf that you deserve, but show up at the door. Because if you don't, good luck getting to the 25% benchmark. All right, there are other areas to dive into though outside of marketing. So let's jump into those other areas. And the first one that comes to my mind is analytics leadership. The metrics in digital sales are nothing like the in-store business metrics, other than obviously you have to drive top line and you watch your profit. All the causals such as display, lobby display, NCAPs, TPRs, there are equivalents of all of them online, but they're not the same. So you need to be best buddies, and analytics people need to be best buddies with your e-commerce people so you can define the right metrics. And the dashboard is actually making its way up to senior leadership. Because again, how else will you get to the 25%? And then we'll move to supply chain, which I'll actually break up into three parts. I think of it as supply, delivery, logistics, and packaging. So let's talk about supply first. So this is, I've seen enough of an occasion where e-commerce fulfillment or let's say case packs set aside or inventory set aside for e-commerce is the bottom of the totem pole. And what sometimes might happen when there's a stock situation is e-commerce being on the lower end of the pecking order, products go out of stock online. Now, when you compare that with products going out of stock offline, the consumer usually will come back, the shopper, next week and buy it in store or drive to another store close enough and buy your SKU. Online, you lose organic SEO, which means claiming that back, you just have to invest a ton more dollars to come back up. So my plea to supply chain here is a very simple one. E-commerce actually needs to be on top of the pecking order. I'm going to play back what I've heard from leadership over the years. If e-commerce is such a small part of the business, why can't you make it the top of the pecking order? Because it won't destroy the numbers anyway if it's on top of the pecking order. So this has to be a two-way street. You can't say this from two ends of your mouth. That's as easy as it gets. On the delivery logistics side, there are tons of metrics here that customers measure that, again, look and feel a little different from the in-store business model. Sometimes it's the same as the business model, but the time has come for the industry to pay attention and have a supply chain scorecard on what the order fill rates are, because number two here impacts number three, and there are penalties, not necessarily as in writing checks or on-invoice deductions, but actually losing SEO, which can be far more fatal than paying an on-invoice deduction or off-invoice penalty for supply chain and logistics. The third one is supply chain packaging. We discussed it a little bit earlier, but guess who procures the cardboard box for you that you put the product in. It's supply chain. So supply chain, you have a role to play here. You have a role to play in multi-packs. So I think of supply chain as three individual parts and in other areas to drive to. The next one may surprise all of you, but what I feel very strongly is the incredible role of IT. Usually, I've found in almost every CPG company I've touched, either by being at it or having friends and associates work for them, IT usually plays a role in the background, which is that of more partnering with the business when a business has a need. But I feel IT folks in this digital journey have a huge role to play in the transformation to digital selling. It may have started with a simple word like EDI 10, 15 years ago, and that's more the technical function. But these are folks that are reading up and are exposed to new technologies every day in voice, AI. Be the bold ones that actually empathize with your IT and ask them to be your reverse mentor on the technology side. I guarantee you there are people in your IT folks waiting for their opportunity who will step up to the plate. And to IT folks, this is your opportunity. Step up to the plate, guys and gals. And the last one, without which this whole presentation is a complete waste of time, is finance and corporate strategy. And why I say that is every company has a what we call a strat plan, or a build of the next 3 years, or a build of the next 24 months. If e-commerce doesn't make its way to the strat plan, then the left-hand side, which is finance, or the CFO, is not going to know of a need or an investment in e-commerce. And it's like the tail wagging the dog. If e-commerce is not in the strat plan, you're not going to get the investments that you want because you're pulling it out of op expenses, which have already been assigned somewhere else. So as a leader, you're responsible for getting and landing e-commerce into the corporate strategy. Find these people in your organization. And I use the word corporate loosely. It could be sales strategy. It could be regional strategy. It could be marketing strategy. It doesn't really matter. Somebody writes a strategic plan in your company, find them. And e-commerce needs to very much be part of that. But this will also only happen if marketers, as we discussed in a previous area, step up to the plate. So let me wrap this up here with some key net takeaways in my mind that I thought we should chat a little bit about. The first one is my favorite term, which is this is not going to go away. So I've heard many times in the industry. Maybe it'll be fun just to keep tabs and drop a nickel for each time one of us hears this, which is this is a passing fad. It'll last a few years. It'll go away, things of that nature. Amanda, what do you think? Is it going to go away?
No, I don't think it's going to go away.
Absolutely not. So e-commerce is not going to go away. It's going to grow and grow and grow. Second is, excuse me, befriending your e-commerce teams. We talked about the rebels, get to know them, become friends with them, get reverse mentorship. That's what happens when you talk 800 miles an hour. The third one that I talked about right in the beginning, which I think is an important one, is all of us are home these days, whether we like it or not, want to or not. We have a 12-week window of which 2 have already expired, where you can upskill and learn something new. And I know many of you in this call that we routinely engage with on text messaging, we chat, WhatsApp. Some of you are already doing that, but I've noticed in the last few weeks that New York Post is actually putting out digital marketing, digital selling courses that normally would cost $2,500 for like $39 and $29. And I actually signed up for a digital marketing course, believe it or not. And I found the first 4 or 5 lectures. Maybe I'm not learning too many new things, but I'm picking up some terms I didn't know before. And hence the earlier reference to TikTok. The bad news for the industry and all of you here is you're going to see me on TikTok with videos pretty soon. But this is your short window to upskill. Leverage the moment, learn a new skill in digital selling and digital marketing. The fourth one is not for any of you who are on this webinar. It's for your leadership, starting with your CMO, your CFO, your chief operating officer, your chief financial officer. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard, I don't have time for social media, or social media, shouldn't I be concerned about privacy? Because when you got on Google in 1999, you already signed away your privacy rights. And the reason why you need to be on social media is not because anyone's asking anybody to post 36.5 times a day. you should follow your own brands. You should follow your competitors, because consumers are talking about your brands and your competitors' brands on social media, on Instagram. Some of you I know don't have Instagram accounts. My challenge to you walking away from here today is, because I'm one of those people that will follow up, please have an Instagram account, because that's where your brands are doing storytelling. And if 80% of digital selling is marketing and you don't have an Instagram account, you're the reason you missed the bus. And marketing will never meet you halfway or the 80% of the way in this case. So get serious about social media. That learning message back to me, Shri, get serious about TikTok. And research all three of the below, which is get to understand the difference on Amazon 1P and 3P. They are not the same. They're radically different. Don't be the one that's scared to experiment with 3P. You don't have to go it alone. There are many partners who can act as providers for you in the 3P journey, but get to know what that is. And then D2C, even if your company doesn't have it, is not researching it, follow a handful of brands. You find often that in the beauty and high-end luxury fashion industry, virtually every brand has a D2C model. So follow 4 or 5 of these on Instagram and Facebook, as well as tap them on make them favorites on your browser and look at them occasionally to see how they're doing storytelling and how they're actually communicating. And they're the best at actually disseminating education, talking to a consumer. And last, from an omni-channel perspective, whether you have a role to play or not in the omni-channel journey, get involved with your customers. Be the curious one that asks, what's going on with the Walgreens.com? What's going on with the Walgreens in-store business model that connects it? This is the opportunity. Moving on to number 6, as I've mentioned multiple times, this is not a sales responsibility alone. Marketing has a huge role to play. On the previous page, we talked about supply chain. We talked about the CFO strategy. E-commerce is a company-wide effort to be successful. It's truly cross-functional. And then number 7, a vastly untapped resource in the industry that I see is your vendors and suppliers, whether they come from analytics, whether they come from content, whether they come from marketing, agency, things of that nature. They are a treasure trove of knowledge. No reason to be shy. Ask them to coach, ask them to be part of the training journey and learn from them. And lastly, I'll close with my favorite statement of the day. You own this, guys, and don't be the one that ... With that, I'll turn it over back to Amanda. Thanks for letting me be here and babble away. And if anyone has any questions, shoot it our way on the chat session. If not, make sure you're safe.
That's right. So there's a question panel next to chat. You can go ahead and fire off any questions that you have for Sri or for me in the question section. We'll give it just a few minutes to see. It looks like we've got a couple people typing. So that's good. We're going to give them a few minutes. But Sri, thanks so much. Provocative, as usual.
I actually kept it kosher, Amanda.
I know you did. I know. It was good. Matt Poley said, nice job, Sri. Looking good.
I did groom for this session. If you had seen me on the trial run yesterday, you'd have laughed, Matt.
All right. We do have a question that just came through. So I'm going to go ahead and start this with a live answer. It looks like it's a comment, not a question. This is from Richard. D2C isn't a panacea for food. Let's take breakfast. It's not convenient nor cost effective for consumers to go to Kellogg.com for cereal, Dole for bananas, and dairy, and have each shipped separately to them. So do you have any thoughts or responses to that, Sri?
Absolutely. Absolutely do. I'm not recommending, I'm be very clear, I'm not recommending that every brand, every SKU should be on D2C. Absolutely not. What I'm recommending is for each of you as commercial folks in your organization to follow other D2C brands, and for marketing in your organization to determine when they want to actually curate innovation. Should they use D2C as a business model in a limited opportunity with a handful of consumers to actually test out how it works before it goes to the store shelf, especially in food and beverages? Because with this change that's going to happen, again, the change is not 80% of retail is going to shift to online, but there is a large amount of dollars that's going to shift hands when it goes from this 16 odd range. In food and beverage, probably more like the 5% range to 8 or 10% range. But food and beverage is so large, it's like 1.6 or 7 trillion a year. It's such a massive part of the GDP that even a 3% shift is a lot. that marketing will actually take innovation and do a limited test, because coming is the day not too far from you. I actually thought it'll be 2020, except NACDS got canceled, where your customers will actually ask you when you bring in innovation. It'll no longer be about how much you invest in a display. It'll be, what data can you give me via test you've done to say this is the best flavor in a food example. Hope that helps.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's go. We've got a couple other questions here that have shown up. So one is, are there any specific digital marketing courses you would recommend for both current and upcoming e-commerce rebels, like the New York Post one you are currently taking?
Absolutely. Courses is the way that I continue my own personal self-development. But before we get to courses and I ask you to spend any money, I'd ask you to do one or two other things to be able to continue learning in this journey. Obviously, Wayne, you've asked a question. I'm not so sure who asked the question. I apologize. But in this journey of learning, if you don't have an Instagram account, you don't have a Facebook account, and now whether you like it or not, a TikTok account, you're following Twitter, you are following a handful of D2C brands, that needs to be the first step of the leading journey. And one area where I get to learn without investing money but time is LinkedIn tends to have amazing articles across the board. If you have the patience to actually open and learn and read LinkedIn articles, you don't even need to resort to paid learning. And the best time, I find the best time personally, LinkedIn has the maximum number of articles relevant to things I'm looking for, shows up on Sunday evenings at around 6 p.m. I would say early evening, 6 p.m. works for me, but I've found generally that early evening on Sunday is an amazing place. And once we move away from the without investing learning, investing time versus investing money, there are digital certifications available from Kellogg, which tends to be one of the industry leading ones, but those cost a good 10, 20K. I'm not going to be the one that tells you go chase those. I'm going to suggest there's one that go to New York Post, nypost.com today after this. They are offering a ton of digital classes, like a digital marketing masterclass. It's probably about 1,000 hours of learning in between all the content you'll get to read and the webinars you'll get to attend, learn at your own. They're offering it for $39 or some crazy number like that versus the $2,500 it normally costs, and you can learn over the course of a year and upskill yourself. So the one I'm going to recommend today from a paid perspective is actually a cheap one, and it's NY Post. And I'm doing it myself, and I'm finding a lot of value.
So one thing that I would also add besides LinkedIn is there are a lot of conferences that are moving their summits online. I know the Adobe Summit was just yesterday. So tons of really amazing digital marketing content that gets presented at Adobe Summit every year. And that's a crazy expensive conference. And now almost all of that content has been loaded live for free. So I don't even know if it's gated behind any kind of login or anything, but a lot of that is really great content. And also lean on your vendors and your specialist partners like us at OneSpace, because we do a lot of speaking at different conferences in person throughout the year. And we're shifting that content online just like all of your other partners. And so to Sri's point earlier, we have a lot of learnings that we're happy to share with you. A lot of really, compelling e-commerce content, things, even just articles and white papers. I wrote an ebook recently about image carousels and what you can do to maximize those. So there's a lot of different content that providers like OneSpace are also delivering. So make sure to just be willing to be inquisitive and be a lifelong learner, and you'll find it. It's out there right now for sure. Okay, we've got some more questions. So let's see. This one is from Wayne. Sri, what's your read around the long-term viability of Instacart versus grocers being able to build out their own credible offerings?
So I think if we go back in history about 4 weeks, Wayne, I would have been the first one to tell you that Instacart is going to grow disproportionately to the rest of e-commerce, because grocers would not have been willing to invest the capital required. I think what's happened in the last 4 weeks has trained stores across America that there's a new phenomenon here of how groceries can actually continue to be touched by their loyal consumers and keep loyalty, and that is through digital mechanisms. Doesn't mean all of them will be home delivery. Instacart, of course, does home delivery. So I see a split of this responsibility. What would have been an uncharted turf for Instacart in this leading history from here on, if nothing had changed, will now be a split between Instacart owning home delivery and grocers really beefing up what would have been Instacart stuff via home delivery into the BOPIS space, which is buy online, pick up in store. And grocers actually investing to keep their loyalty within their store. What, as you all know, if you've used Instacart, Instacart actually spreads loyalty of a shopper, a consumer across multiple brands, multiple retailers. It just opens up a plethora of loyalty splitting, but grocers can protect that by offering BOPIS, which will tend to be a significantly lower cost capital investment than and then outsource home delivery to Instacart. So just to close that again, I see that turf, which would have been Instacart's and owned by home delivery, now split into two, which is actually great for omnichannel.
Okay, we've got another question here. This one's from Oshi. What is the best way to manage pricing online, specifically for luxury? There tends to be price compression through gray channels. Understand that controlling distribution is one job to be done. What else can we do?
Great question, Osh, because I've dealt with this problem. I've dealt with this challenge for $5 SKUs, for $2.99 SKUs, and for $99 fragrances, up and down across multiple subcategories. My answer is going to be one that you're not going to expect. Traditionally, you'd hear bring on a external third party like Boris, etc., to help you control it, or get disciplined about MAP pricing. Those are all great tactics, and I'd be the first one to endorse them. But I'm yet to see fast-moving consumer goods enforce any of those to the extent that they should. So what I'm going to recommend is the way you can do better with value for the consumer is first understanding value for the consumer, and the buck starts and stops with marketing. Hence, my humble opinion, very strongly I feel to do this right for the consumer, because our responsibility is to deliver quality product at value, is, I will repeat, marketing. You own e-commerce 80%, and this problem of pricing online and the stuff will go away if you claim your turf, what's rightfully yours, rightfully yours marketing, and you partner with sales on managing it. Because tactics like MAP, bringing on third parties, they only last short term, and then it's like playing whack-a-mole. If marketing's in the journey with you and the great partners and you're great partners with them, you can conquer this ecosystem, this problem.
Okay, this is the last question that we have so far in our question panel. Let's see here. You mentioned voice. Do you believe it's a viable channel? Retailers and CPG are barely getting the hang of flex fulfillment, BOPIS, curbside, et cetera, before figuring out other channels.
You know, Danielle, if I circle back 4 weeks in history, I'd have given you a different answer and said no. I would have said no, it's not a viable channel. Is it going to start up and there going to be some sales through voice? Yeah, absolutely. But is it one that's going to be, question number one, is it large enough to matter? Then my answer would have been no. But I've learned in the last 4 weeks reading, researching, and how what has happened in China, the revolution in e-commerce, the role of China in the world. China has now, in the last year or two, Alibaba has opened its own brick and mortar stores. I think they're called Hana. I forget the exact name, HANA or something of that nature. Those stores are directly connected to a voice device that Alibaba has chosen to put out. So a decent percent of shopping in Alibaba's actual brick and mortar stores comes through voice shopping. And I'm sure the United States will play catch up at some point. But what I haven't seen in the United States as of yet, which I have seen with Alibaba, is in the US, no retailer has made the capital investment, yes, including Amazon, to truly leverage it. I see the current Alexa model, the Google Home device, etc., are still experimentative in nature. So to answer your question in full transparency, Danielle, I still don't feel that it's ready yet, but will it get there following the heels of China in the next 2-4 years? Yes, absolutely. If you're an e-commerce professional in a commercial role, please don't ignore voice.
Thanks, Sri. That's all the questions we've had submitted for today. Just as a reminder, if you guys are in a situation where you need some educational resources or content help, I know you guys are probably knee deep in supply chain and resolving those issues right now. But we also have a short window, like Sri mentioned, to get content right. So if you need help, let us know. This session is also being recorded, and we're going to be sharing it out afterwards. So for those of you guys who want to share it internally, feel free. Or if there were others who are watching this at a later date, it's because you found the recording. And don't forget to register for next week's session. Again, next week's is with Tim Madigan. Tim's another industry veteran. A lot of you guys probably already know him, and he's going to be talking about how CPGs can pivot during circumstances that warrant that, including this situation with COVID-19. He's also going to be specifically exploring that more deeply, comparing that to food service business units within organizations and what they're dealing with right now that the restaurant market is not an option. So definitely, keep us posted. It looks like we do have one more question that just came through, and that's, would love to hear about your thoughts on predictive content. So Sri, if you don't mind kind of taking a crack at that would be
Absolutely.
great.
So predictive content already exists around you, believe it or not. And it exists in various forms, but it's really backed by AI today. So often you'll hear people saying, I just had a conversation about blah, 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 and look at the ad I've been served up on Facebook, and that is predictive content AI. Another form of predictive content is a simple mechanism Amazon has been using for years, and Walmart has been using for years, Target has been using for years, retailer.com has been using for years, which is when you click on blah, by you clever use of cookies and tracking, as you move along the spectrum of browsing across the internet, you find an ad for a product that you actually clicked on, trail you even 2 days later, 48 hours later. And then when you're on a retailer's website, to make AI suggestions to you, others who also bought this, bought that, all of that is predictive content at the end of the day. But I also want to go back to product detail content and the relationship of AI to product detail content. I don't think any, and I'm going to say this categorically as any, CPG brand today has truly understood the value of AI to the extent they're going to use it for product content on a product detail page, if that's what you are asking, Osh. But from a point of sale perspective, yes, absolutely. It's been around for 5+ years.
So there is one more question here, and this, let's see here. It says, one of my favorite quotes is, the greatest loss is if we come out the other end of this unchanged. So given all that's happening in the world, what have you reflected on during these past few weeks?
I think the biggest eye-opener to me is a personal learning that has happened. And that personal learning is empathy. Of course, I live in Manhattan. We're right at the epicenter of what's going on today. I wouldn't say just in the United States, but the whole world. I live in this city because I love this city. I like the hustle bustle of the city, but what a humbling experience. I live on the Upper West Side, or the Lincoln Center area. I'm a couple blocks away from the Riverside Park, and I'm a few blocks away from, I would argue, is the world's hustle bustle Times Square, which I loved walking through every now and then just for the experience purposes. Now when I walk through Times Square, it's a complete war zone. There's nobody. It feels like it's one of the scenes from Will Smith's movie I Am Legend, like apocalyptic in nature. And it's this humble learning that I've had, how fast things can change. We went from Times Square having hundreds and thousands of cars and human traffic overnight to a war zone. And over the course of the last 2-3 weeks, there's nothing there. And I think the biggest learning for me to reflect on is be adaptable to change. Look at what we're accomplishing today. On a normal business day, if we talked about this webinar being executed this way, our mindset, especially for those of us who've been in this industry multiple decades, would have always been a vote for, why don't we do this in person? Let's do a conference. I've had a deep learning and respect for those that need to work from home. And I promise, when I'm back in the CPG workforce as a leader, I now have a new understanding and empathy for those that will ask me to work from home. It's a no-brainer. And the one thing that I will say in addition, I find that when we work from home, we tend to actually work a lot more. And so take care of yourself. Don't do that, please. But for me, there's a new sense of empathy and learning about just humans in general, and change is coming.
I would echo that. I think, we have We have a new blog actually that's on the website today, and that's the very first thing we recommend for CPGs as well, is to think about your customers right now and to do no harm in that world, right? Take care of those people who need you most right now. But I would echo echo the empathy statement just as a manager of people as well. I mean, it's a critical time for all of us. We all have a lot of really stressful things on the mind, and it's a really challenging time. And I think your employees and your team, while you want to keep them motivated and keep them working hard, understanding where they are as people and doing what you can to check in on them and make sure that they're okay through this, not just physically, but emotionally, because it is an isolating time. I think that that's a really important thing. And as marketers in particular, I know many of you guys on the phone are either in marketing or sales. Much of what we do is about relationships. And I think that for me is the impetus for this whole series, is how do we stay connected as a community, a team of e-commerce rebels? How do we stay connected? How do we help each other through this time? And not just help each other survive, but be better off on the other side. That upskilling comment that Sri made earlier, for example, using that time to educate yourself and be better on the other side of this. And so I would say, yes, kudos, and I echo what you said. Okay, so I think that is it. I don't think we have any more questions in the queue. So if you do come up with any others, please feel free, shoot them my way, send them directly to Sri. I'm sure we're all happy to chat. Find us on LinkedIn, and don't forget to register for that session next week.